Yes, I see we are live on Twitch. So I think we can start. Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us for this book club with live author Q&A. Today we are discussing Nectar of the Gods by Liv Albert and Thea Engst. So thank you, Liv, for joining us. I am Alex, and I will briefly be introducing what SASA is and some protocols for the event. So SASA is a Safe Ancient Study Alliance. Our mission is to reverse the current downward trend in the study of the ancient world by engaging the public and bringing together students and scholars to share their passion for the study of the ancient world in order to inspire a vast new generation of students. We are pretty much anywhere on social media. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, LinkedIn. Most of the time we are at Save Ancient Studies. And if you follow our TikTok or Instagram, you might actually see some of the cocktails that we'll be talking about today. So for this event, please be kind and respectful as you always are. Listen and ask thoughtful questions throughout the event. So if you have any questions you want to ask Liv, I guess this is your moment. Please be patient with technology and those administering it. We will be streaming this on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. It will also be saved on these platforms. So because they are recorded and archived. And most of all, have fun. I guess this is the most important part. And I think you can, if you enjoy SASA's live events, you can become a recurring donor. We do regular Archeo gaming events or book clubs or reading groups. So if you enjoy all of those, please consider becoming a supporter of SASA with a recurring monthly donation. For as little as $3 a month, you can help us save ancient studies. You can go to saveancientstudies.org/donate to learn more. And I think if you're watching this on Twitch, if you scroll down, there will be a donate button as well, which may be a little bit easier. And I think those who have Amazon Prime get one free Twitch subscription. So if you haven't subscribed to anyone yet, maybe you want to subscribe to us. So thank you for joining us. I will stop sharing the screen. So Liv, hi, thank you for joining us. I guess most people who are here will already know who you are, but just for those who don't, can you briefly introduce yourself and yeah, just who are you?
Yeah. So I'm Liv. I am the, I guess, author of Nectar of the Gods, as well as another book of Greek mythology called the Greek Mythology, the Gods, Goddesses, and Heroes Handbook. But I'm also, and perhaps, yes, those are my books, exactly. But I am perhaps better known as the podcaster behind Let's Talk About Myths, Baby, which is a Greek mythology podcast that I've been doing for what feels like forever now, talking all about all things ancient.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk about the Nectar of the Gods book today. If anyone in the chat has any questions for Liv, you can just write your question and we'll ask it. So first off, where did the idea for the book come from? Tell me about how you wanted to honor Dionysus in this way, because it's literally dedicated to Dionysus on the acknowledgement page. So where did the idea come from? How did you decide to write this book?
I wish I could say that it was all my idea, but it actually came from the publisher of my first book, who also commissioned my first book. They wanted a book of Greek mythology, and then they came to me about a year later and they were like, what do you think about Greek mythology themed cocktails? Mm-hmm. I was like, well, that sounds amazing. So we basically went from there. It was their idea, but I definitely ran with it wholeheartedly, because I think, not least because of Dionysus, but also themed cocktails are really fun. And there's so many myths and things. So for me, it was exciting because I got to cover a lot of more niche myths and characters in this book, because it wasn't meant to be an introductory book of Greek mythology where you have to cover the certain people and, the people who have full stories or whatever, available in the mythology. So in this case, I was like, well, I just get to have fun. So it was a whole sea of puns and just dorky plays on existing cocktail names and really niche Greek mythological characters and stuff. So it wasn't my idea, but I definitely ran with it in a pretty real way.
And had you ever thought that you would write a book like this? Because I mean, it's fantastic. I think it's at the same time it's this modern mythography, like it's a collection of mythic stories, almost like the ancient texts or subsequent retellings. But it's also a very detailed and helpful cocktail book. So I think basically it's what Apollodorus would have written if he wrote a symposium text. So did you ever think you would write something like this earlier or?
Not really. No, I mean, it's super dorky in a pretty real way. It was really fun though, because like I worked together with Thea Engst, as you've noted that she's a co-author with me, and she made all the cocktails. So it was a fun, like, weird little collaborative experience. And then the illustrator too was the same illustrator of my first book, Sarah Richard, who's amazing. But no, I mean, I definitely don't think I would have imagined writing cocktails. It feels so specific, but it also just fit in a really fun way. And it's very Apollodorus. That's a great reference point of like, really like straight and to the point. Like, here are the basics of this myth, but also here is how to make a cocktail. But yeah, it was fun because like, I also got to pull in, like, it's primarily myths. I snuck in a Roman character by using Dido. I just like didn't like, at one point I wanted there to be like a little bit more fun with Roman mythology. And my publisher was like, no, we want it Greek. So then I just snuck in Dido and just didn't tell them that she's not Greek. And, no one's the wiser because they don't know the content and try to get in there. But yeah, it was fun. So I got to like play around with a lot of that stuff. There's a couple like historical ones, and it was different from what I normally write, like both for the first book and the podcast, just in that like there wasn't the same limitations. I was just able to have fun with all the supremely dorky things going on. Sorry, my dishwasher is now suddenly making very loud noises that I did not anticipate.
You're washing your next cocktail cups.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, it's very detailed as well. Like, I mean, the bulk of it is the cocktails themselves, but I mean, there's an introduction, and it literally like has an introduction on like ancient cups, or like the art that is depicted on ancient ceramics, or to symposia. And there's even a paragraph to the playwright Eubulus, which I mean doesn't get mentioned at all, I think. So I mean, obviously you're constantly researching mythology for your podcast and for your other book, like, but was there a difference in how this book came to be? Like, did you do the different kinds of research, for example, on the drinking in the ancient world topic? Or
Yeah, absolutely. It was really different. It was fun finding that Eubulus quote, which is just like one of the best quotes ever. To like sum it up for people, it's basically like Dionysus is talking to somebody in a play, and it's just a fragment of this play that we have. But essentially laying out like how many craters of wine is like just enough, and like lays out exactly what happens when you start drinking too many craters of wine. And I think the last one is like you end up vomiting on the floor. And it's just like, it's the best like drunkenness quote that happens to be, like 2,500 years old or something. So it was very fun finding that kind of thing. And the ancient glassware was like my passion project in this, where like the publisher was a little hesitant to start introducing so many random words for ancient glassware. And I was like, hey, but look, like it's really going to make this like so much better and so much nerdier. So yeah, every cocktail, instructions like presents it as if you should or could be using ancient glassware. I guess not glass, but ancient drinking vessels. And I had to be really limited. So we had to like watch quite how many we introduced, because then I also had to speak like what they were. And they wanted me to try to like also tell people how to pronounce it. And we've got like the plural issues in Greek. So I'm like, okay, well, here's the kantharos, plural kantharoi. Like, let's spell it all out of like how you can do this. So I had to be kind of limited, but it made for the illustrations to be like so much more fun too, because everyone is illustrated as if it's in this ancient drinking vessel. And we got to have so much fun with some of the art that's on there. So like my favorite thing was giving all this information to the illustrator, to Sarah, about like the sheer volume of like silly little Heracles cups that exist. Like my favorite one is this one where he's like literally in a cup surrounded by fish, and he's like sailing through the sea, but like in a kylix. And it's just the dorkiest thing. So we got to have a lot of fun with that. Or even, you know, at one point, Sarah was like, I think this one needs to be an amphora. Like I think it was the Medea one where she was like, my illustration just looks better in an amphora. Can we like change the recipe to be an amphora? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So we got to, you know, like got to play around with a lot of that stuff. But I think it introduces all this historical context to people. Like it might be mythology, but like you can buy a cocktail book and also learn about like all the cool pottery that existed and like how they used it and why. And yeah, it was like a big nerdy push on my part to be like, no, we're gonna like obsessively use ancient glassware. And I forget who, somebody on Classics Twitter told me or suggested to me that I used a psych dirt for like a shaker. Which is like, you know, not a shaker, but it's like a cooling wine. So it's like, it's close enough, like it's used to cool. And so we got to like even have fun playing around with, you know, like what could be used if you're making an ancient, like a cocktail using ancient things. Like they obviously didn't prep for that. So okay, you know, don't actually shake a psych or you're going to get in a lot of trouble. Like it's going to be really messy, but we're going to use it for this context. Or I don't know. Yeah, it was a thrill of a nerdy time to involve all that historical stuff.
No, I mean it's. I mean, I think it really shows that. And I think one of the reviews on the cover by Rachel Smythe says it's cheeky, fun, and educational. I think that sums it up pretty well. Like it is a very fun book. The illustrations, I was going to ask you about them as well. Like they are amazing, but at the same time you learn quite a lot. I mean, you can learn quite a lot through the terminology that is used or the background of the myths and sometimes there's these shorter paragraphs, like I saw one earlier about like the mystery cults, for example. I think the Eubulus one, which I thought was a fantastic quote as well, is also in one of those. You also said I mean, your previous book was Greek mythology, the gods, goddesses, and heroes handbook. How do you sort of do you see this second book as sort of an extension of that, or for example, like how do the two work together? Can you read the first one and then let's say, okay, I like this myth, so I'm gonna drink something and look it up in the second, like or yeah, do you sort of see them as a whole of in two parts, or how do you see that relationship between them?
Yeah. I mean, I think Nectar of the Gods is a great companion because the first book was really about like the publisher wanted a really like succinct introduction to Greek mythology, the basics, the most important myths, like the stuff that you should know. And their intention too with that book was to connect it to pop culture. So like, you know, you watch Disney's Hercules or you read Percy Jackson, like here is the background to the characters that you might have learned through that. And so that was really fun. You know, I got to play around with that, but it was quite limited in terms of like, I had this many words and no more to cover myths. And so like, it was a lesson in like brevity, like the Heracles section, I think I squished into like maybe less than 800 words. And it's like, it's Heracles. So it was like really like point by point, like this is what he did. You don't get anything more. Whereas this was fun because like, I was still limited in terms of word count, but like, I didn't have to tell all the basics. I didn't have to like cover this certain thing. So I was able to have a bit more fun with it, like throw in all the little paragraphs you're talking about. They're called sidebars in the publishing section of it. And those were super fun. Like I could toss out these silly little historical facts. And then also like, I got to have a bit more freedom in this one. Sorry, now I'm really barely answering your question, but I got to have a bit more freedom in the Nectar of the Gods because it wasn't like meant to be covering these specific myths. And so I got to like put a bit more of my personality into things that like are a bit more like my podcast vibe on mythology, like particularly my hatred of Theseus, and Jason too, but a little bit less so. Like the cocktail for Jason is called Jason's Folly, and like the cocktail for Theseus is just called the Crimes of Theseus. And I just lay out everything you did. And like in the first book, I had to be a bit more fair, a bit more like broad and like, this is how generally Theseus is seen. And then in the cocktails, I was like, nah, like this is how I see Theseus. So it was more fun in that respect, but I got to like kind of play around with it. So I do think like the first book is great for if you want to learn the basics of Greek mythology. And then the Nectar of the Gods is like, if you want to make cocktails, if you want like more niche, nerdy stuff, learn a bit more, but also maybe see a bit more of like my personality side versus like the more generic mythology of it all. Like I definitely got to have a bit more fun. Like there's even a cocktail where I laid out how Atlantis like is into myth and is into Lost City and all these things. And it's like, there was no point to that, but I was like, I just want, like, I can use this cocktail to like tell people the truth about Atlantis. So yeah, it was fun in that respect of like the little things that I could add differently. So I'll just say, I think it's a great companion, but certainly it's like, it's not necessarily like a book if you want to learn the basics of mythology. That would be my first one for sure.
Yeah, but at the same time, you could, I mean, look at it from a educational, I mean, let's not say educate, but like, maybe say educational, maybe not. Yeah. Content that you could learn about it. And I think, I mean, in the ancient world, like if you look at texts on symposia, for example, I mean, these were the context where people were drinking, but they were talking about stuff, they were learning about stuff as well. So I think it sort of reflects that. I was also wondering, because you have, I think, 75 cocktails in the book.
So many.
So how did you decide to link a specific cocktail to a specific character or a specific episode from myth? Like, did you start from the cocktails and look what was possible there, and then look for a character to associate it with, or did you start the other way around from the myth and look at like how does I mean, which cocktail would fit with that character or myth, for example? Like, how did that creative process work?
Yeah, so that part was really fun because it was a lot of like coordinating with the mixologist for that aspect. So I basically started by creating just the cocktail names. Like I just came up with 75 silly names where like half of them are plays on existing cocktails. Like, you know, there's Hestia's Old Fashioned, or there's like a Hector's Chariot Sidecar, like things that were like a joke. Oh, my favorite one is the pun, the Thalas Sea Breeze. This Thalassa means sea. So, you know, like I just kind of came up with like a bunch of nerdy names, and then some of them were more, you know, less about the cocktail and more about just like the character, like the Crimes of Theseus, or Odysseus's Wine Dark Sea is a fun one. Like, so I basically just had a really dorky brainstorming session where I just came up with 75 cocktail names. I should also give credit. At the time, I was also chatting a lot with my friends in Ancient History Fangirl, that podcast, Jen and Jenny, and they came up with a couple of really fun names as well, including one that ended up on the title. Jen did come up with the Appletini of Discord, which is one of the best for sure. So, you know, we just had so much fun with like, or I had so much fun with these puns and creating all of this stuff. And then from there, like I had the list of 75, and then I would like come up with like themes or like flavors or strength or whatever. So like, you know, kind of these kind of, I think, say Demeter's, which is Demeter's Bitter Harvest. I was like, okay, you know, this is an earthy goddess. Let's go with like an earthy cocktail. So coming up with those kind of themes of the cocktail. Sometimes I would say like it should have this alcohol, or like in the case Heracles it's just the lay booze of Heracles, which is another good pun. And I was just kind of like, it should be strong. Just make it strong, whatever. It just needs to be like really hardcore. The flight of Pegasus, I think is what that one's called. And it's just a flight of shots. So it's like, you know, I would come up with these kind of basic ideas, and then Thea, the mixologist, would come in and like turn them into these really intricate cocktails. Like some of them are wild, like stuff I've never even heard of. So it was like some I would, you know, have a lot more influence. The muddled Maenad is like a sangria. So it was like, okay, it has to be wine based. It's for Dionysus's Maenads. I want it to be bloody. So it's got like a bunch of muddled berries. Like a lot of them were bloody because this is Greek mythology. But my favorite, I can't believe I haven't mentioned it yet. My favorite title in the whole book is Agamemnon's Bathwater. And yeah, that one, like the fact that a publisher not only let me name it Agamemnon's Bathwater, but like the description I gave to Thea for this cocktail was like, okay, it's called Agamemnon's Bathwater. this is a guy who got murdered in a bloody mess in his bath. I want it to look like a bloody bathwater cocktail. So like, you know, those were a real thrill. Like that passed through. That was no problem. I was like, okay, I expected somebody to flag that, but it's Greek mythology, so we're going with it. So, you know, it was just kind of that, like I would come up with concepts. So in that case, I was like, it should look like bloody bathwater and be pretty boozy because, you know, it's Agamemnon. And then Thea created them. And then once I had the cocktails, then I would write the mythological aspects, and like she would give me the instructions and I would make them super nerdy and add all the kylakes and the cantharoi and all of that aspect. And, you know, even the instructions are super dorky. So I'm trying to think of some of them, but it's like, you know, things like make a prayer to Dionysus or, you know, I'm trying to think of something funny, but I'm going to find one that's a thrill of mine. Cause I definitely had here's just the one that's open is Hector's chariot sidecar. And the last line of the instructions is garnish with a lemon wheel skewered like poor Hector through the pith on one side and the other. So it can balance across the rim of the glass, precarious like Troy's fate. So it was like, you know, I can make it super mythological and really dorky while also being like, well, this is how you make this cocktail. Or like Achilles' smashed heel. Like you skewer. Yeah, you guys have made that one. You skewer a bunch of raspberries on a skewer like Achilles' heel. You know, like that mess. So yeah, it was quite fun to come up with those things, like get the instructions and make them really dorky.
Yeah, no, I also like when I was making the Achilles one, like I was also thinking, okay, this is like we literally like skewer the thing, like the heel itself, and the entire cocktail is red as well. So it's basically you're drinking like a cup of blood. But it's actually one of my favorite ones as well. Like it tastes really good.
Oh yeah, that one was great. I love that one.
No, but I love the puns as well. Like I had some listed here. Most of them you already mentioned because they're so great. Like the Appletini of Discord. I mean, that's fantastic. The Apollo Spritz, the Cosmospolitan, the Bloody Medea. I mean, I like that you started from the pun side because that's, I mean, so much fun. And then you thought about the colors and the taste as well. Like that's really interesting to me because in classical studies or the classical reception studies, we are seeing more of these like sensory studies things. Like we're seeing how like people conceptualize taste or touch in the ancient world. And I think, I mean, unironically, somebody could do a study of your book, like looking at how ideas of the character like are associated with the taste of these cocktails. I think that would be fantastic. Like, were there some cocktails or some myths that you could tie very easily into existing cocktails, or did you encounter some of them that were more that you had more problems with? Like one of them that I also really liked was Briareus's brew, but I imagine like for a character like him, like it's not the most. I mean, he doesn't receive the most mentions in mythology. Like he's a very niche character, basically. I mean, literally as well, because he's locked away. But like, how did you have problems with some of them, like tying them to myths, or how did that work?
Those ones, like particularly Briareus and so many others, like Thalassa and all these different ones, like those ones were my like passion project where I was like, these people, for one, I talk about it all the time, but like I will say the word hecatonchires like until the end of time. It's my favorite word in Greek myth. I just love it. So I was like, well, there's no way that I'm writing this book and there's not going to be a hecatonchires in there. And then I think I probably tried to name one of the cocktails like after them. And I was like, no, but Briareus's brew that sounds better. So it was like, playing with a pun on that. But a lot of them was this idea that like they aren't mentioned very often. And, that's not necessarily wrong because like typically it's that there isn't a full story attached. Like Thalassa, like she's a goddess, she's the sea. There's not really any story attached to her. But when I just have to write one paragraph of a cocktail, it doesn't matter. And so I can include these characters that people otherwise wouldn't learn about unless they're, reading Hesiod for fun, which like, who does that? So that was a thrill to me to be able to do that. It also was nice. Like I made it so that I think at least half of the cocktails are based on women characters. which is also super rare in mythology, not least because like they just don't have a lot of stories associated with them. But it doesn't matter because I can mention Thalassa, I can mention like I'm trying to think of other like the more niche women that are involved. But you know, it was fun to be able to do that. So it wasn't so much a trouble as like, because you can kind of always come up with like some kind of idea. Some of the characters definitely fit the cocktails better. There's a joke in the introduction that like a true book of cocktails based in Greek mythology would just be like a book of wine, because obviously that's like their entire lives. And so, you know, like there was definitely a few where I was like, well, these have to be wine based. And we played around with like wine based could also mean like, you know, port and sherry and cognac and like different things where it's like, okay, well, it's like a stretch, but it's closer at least to the myth. Because we can't just make them all about wine as much as I would like that. Just like I was going to say a sea, but Odysseus' Wine Dark Sea definitely is mostly wine. But yeah, so it was fun in that respect of just kind of being able to play around with those characters and then just come up with basic ideas of the, you know, the cocktail that might be associated with it. One of my other favorite silly ones is the only one that's like fully non-alcoholic in the whole book is the Prometheus's liver. You know, like we're going to at least give him a break. So Prometheus's liver is like more of a hangover cure than it is a cocktail. And so I was able to have fun with that too, of like, okay, well, yeah, I'm going to name it one after Prometheus. It's going to be his liver. There's no way there's going to be booze in that. Like we can make a joke out of that itself. Or there's the hair of the three-headed dog, which is like a milder, also kind of a hangover cure. And so playing with the idea of hair of the dog, but it's Cerberus. And like, it was just, yeah, it was very fun to just like nerd out to the nth degree on all of these.
No, I mean, when you read it and when you are making the cocktails, like I've done a couple of weeks ago, like you realize that this is something that was written like as a passion project. Like it is something that you actively see the love that went into it. And I also very much like what you said about more than half of them being about female characters, and you mentioned Theseus as a character who I think more and more people are disliking every single day, and rightfully so, as they should. So I think it is part of this new wave of mythology retelling that are trying to not just try to, but actively deconstruct these elements in the ancient myths themselves. And I think it's very interesting that and even not just but like in this book as well, like you could see those like movements taking place, and maybe through this book more people will realize how much of an unlikable character Theseus actually was. So you said you worked together with a mixologist for this. Like, could you talk a little bit more about how that worked? Like, were they already interested in mythology, or did you have to convince them or to do this, or how much did they know about the ancient myth beforehand? Also, like, how much say did you actually have in the creation of the cocktails? Like you mentioned, you have some ideas that you prepared and sent to the mixologist. Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So because it's all facilitated by the publisher, I didn't have a lot of contact with Thea during the process. And then we kind of connected afterwards. We were having a book together. It was the same I did with Sarah Richard, the illustrator. We just kind of become friends afterwards because we're talking about it and the experience and everything. But I did find out that Thea, who is coincidentally also named Thea, which is like very Greek and great. But she definitely had an interest as well. And so had a lot of fun with what I gave her and really rolled with it in a great way. And the same with Sarah, the illustrator. Like, I did have say, and I think I could have vetoed things or asked for them to be changed, but like everything ended up so perfect, that I really, there was no need, especially because with the cocktails, as long as you've got the same like basic idea, or in the case of some of them, like as long as they're wine based, because various gods, or if it was related to Dionysus, I was like, well, it has to be wine based in some way. And so other than that, like I didn't really have any reason to change anything during the process. So it just worked out really well. It's honestly been like a kind of wild experience watching all of this, because it is all facilitated by the publisher. Like, it's a commissioned book. They wanted it in this way. And, you know, there's a lot of limitations, but at the same time, you know, they picked Sarah for my first book, and her illustrations were like the most incredible thing. And then of course they used her again in this one. And like, I think her illustrations are even better in this one, or they just suit the cocktails even better. Like, and the glassware. And I know she had a lot of fun with that. And I knew she would, because we'd connected after my first book. So it was great to be able to have that experience. And then with Thea too, like now we've stayed in touch and like chat all the time about our book, and like, it's really fun. And so it's just interesting to me that the publisher did all of these decisions. I had no say in, you know, who was involved, but they picked like the best people. And like, we get along so well. We've got like, this book turned out so great. So it really worked out for the best in so many ways. And when it comes to the women stuff that you mentioned earlier too, like that is my whole, you know, shtick. Like that's my whole entire thing when it comes to my podcast and my writing and everything. So it was really fun in this case where I wasn't bound by the limitations of Greek mythology, which is kind of what I do in the podcast too, is like I play with those limitations. And in this book, I was able to, because of the fact that it was just ultimately just cocktails. Like, you know, I wanted it to be accurate, and like, there is a lot of educational content in this, but ultimately it's just cocktails. And so like, you can learn about a lot about the ancient world, like history and mythology and everything, but like, it also got to be my personality. So, you know, we're talking about Theseus, and everyone can learn his crimes now. But then I also got to have fun, and like Ariadne has a cocktail, and it's called Ariadne's Naxian Escape. And it's literally just like an ode to her escaping Theseus and marrying Dionysus. And like, you know, so I was able to like play with so many different things in terms of these women characters and keep them totally accurate to the history and the mythology and like the ancient sources that we have, but also like really have some fun and give them a voice that they rarely get to have in traditional mythological stories. Like obviously we have all these fictional retellings and stuff now, but when it comes to like the actual, you know, retelling the ancient sources, they're often like left behind just because the ancient sources left them behind. Yeah, it was fun.
No, I mean, I mean, this is great. I mean, seeing how it all came together, and especially like the illustration. Like I'm gonna show a couple of them. I mean, this is one for the hot Hephaestus. I mean, look at that, like with the hammer. I mean, and then there's the ceramics as well. This is the next one. Of course, now I'm finding all the pages without. This is Odysseus's Wine Dark Sea, which is again like a great reference. And I mean, would you imagine all the Homeric formulae that we would have had if they drank other things besides wine as well? This one is the Muddled Maenad. This also looks. I mean, these are just fantastic.
Sarah did such a good job. Like she pulled out so much history and so much like accuracy without me even having to say anything. Like in terms of like the Hephaestus one has like the tools he would use on the forge, and like, yeah, that Muddled Maenad one's got a lyre on it while also being like so deeply, you know, Dionysian in other ways. And like, yeah, they're all so good that I know. So Sarah really has a thing for like the death related ones too. So like this is Persephone's pomegranate punch, and look, she's wearing like a ring with a skull on it. Like I did also get to pick which cocktails would get an illustration. And so like a lot of the time I did some that I was like, Sarah's gonna love doing this because she's like a little bit goth in the best way, and like she's gonna want all the death ones. Like I'm gonna find also the other like niche one that I think of is the River Styx, and like, oh my god, like she's so good at that stuff. So as soon as I knew there was like some death related one, I was like, well, I'm going to get Sarah to illustrate it because she's going to kill it. Oh, and that's a good pun one too. That's the Bellini K.
Yeah, that's also one that we made.
Oh, that one is so good. That's one of my favorites.
So is that the one with the with the ice cubes, the rosé ice cubes? Is that the one, or is that another one?
No, that's Ariadne's Naxian Escape.
True. Yeah.
That one is also very good. That one, I will also say, I made the cocktail idea based entirely on Jen of Ancient History Fangirl, who loves Ariadne and rosé. So I did let that one be something that she would love to drink, but also it's so good.
Yeah, I mean, but so I think it was Ariadne's one that I mean, the texture as well is like very, I mean, very different, very cool. Like it's not just like a regular drink. Like it's sort of, I don't know the word in English, but it's like it's a weird. I mean, a good sensation like in your mouth. Like it's sort of like it's cold, but it's liquid, but it's also like kind of like something, and not liquid. Like it's in between them. And
it's the slushy.
Yeah, slushy.
Wine.
That's the word I was looking for. English is hard. No.
I mean, the word slushy, I don't blame you. That's a bizarre word. Yeah, no, that one's so good. It is literally like you just freeze rosé, and because it's wine and like low alcohol content, it freezes, but also then blends so well because it's not super frozen. Yeah, that one was so good. Another, I'm just looking at the illustrations now, and like, so this is those island iced tea. And another one where Sarah just killed it. Cause like, look at Calypso's hand is like clearly gripping Odysseus. And then she also did the like marks for the number of years. And just like, oh, she's great. And the little dolphin. Cause I definitely sent like, here are some of the things that they would, put on ancient art. Little dolphin. It's just.
Wow, I'm loving them even more now. I hadn't noticed that it was the amount of numbers of years.
And like, I didn't tell her to do any of that. She just researches them and is like, okay, I'm going to like mark down the number of years. There's the Danaid one too. There's a Danaid daiquiri, which is another bloody one. And she was like figuring out how to write, I guess it's 50. Yeah. For the Danaids. She's figuring out how to write 50 in ancient Greek. And it was so she just really like ran with all of it. Or we had fun with this Atalanta one, which is, I think, the only one where I made an input on the illustration, or one of the only ones. And basically she had Atalanta like behind the, I'm going to forget what his name is, the guy who races her. But yeah, like he was like winning basically by throwing the apples. And I was like, there's no reason to have him be winning. Let's have her ahead. And we'll just pretend that, she never lost that race at all. And it was fun to be able to just flip those two characters and kind of just play around with the stories and the results, because it's just about the cocktails anyway.
So what I also like about it is, so I've made a couple of them, so I tried it out. But like most of the ingredients and the cocktail tools that you need, like they're relatively easily accessible. Like you need some cocktail stuff, like a shaker or a mixer, but I think most of it is something you find in like general stores or liquor stores. There's even at the beginning there's a table like with substitutions as well, like for the perhaps drinks that are more, I mean, that you have more trouble finding. So I think even for people who may think that they don't have the right stuff at home, this book sort of accommodates possibilities for them to try it out as well. Like, was that topic of accessibility something that you actively thought about? Like, was it important to you during the writing process?
I think I was not familiar enough with like booze and alcohol and stuff to think too much of it. I just kind of let Thea do her thing. She's a professional and knows what's up. So I think that mostly did come from her. I personally, like as a Canadian too, some of the ingredients were quite hard to find. So I have like workarounds and things. But it was interesting also learning the stuff that's like heavily available in the States where this is based versus elsewhere. So that was just kind of interesting, but there are always ways to like make kind of a substitution, and Thea does lay out a lot of the substitutions. I also did try to make like as many of them as I could. So I like bought this whole bar like worth of alcohol. There's like more next to me, just the volume of alcohol that I did end up buying because I wanted to make them. And like, it's just, so there's definitely a lot of different types. If you want to make all the cocktails, like you're going to end up with quite the bar, but at the same time, there are a lot of them that are simpler too, that you can make really easily without, stocking up on too many different types of liquor. The Ariadne's Naxian Escape is a great example, like, and it's so slushy and tasty. And like, it's literally perfect for sipping on a Greek island, like, which was the whole point, so some of them are easier, like Odysseus's Wine Dark Sea is pretty easy too. Just like, I think it's lemon and lavender simple syrup in red wine. And it's like so tasty. So there's a really good mix of ones that are like really intricate cocktails with all these different wild liquors that you've never heard of. And then there are some that are like super simple and easy to make. And so it's nice to have that kind of balance.
It's actually so funny because when we bought the ingredients for the cocktail that we made, we noticed we didn't have that much room in the kitchen. So we actually bought a bar as well. It is right there. Like it's a similar, like it's on wheels, like and all the booze is standing there. And we have the glasses in the middle. Like
it looks so good, right? I bought this whole bar after the cocktail started. I was like, look how pretty my bar is. Now I've got even got an Amazon on here, or I think it's an Amazon. And I've got my Greek liquors. So you just reason to show it all off.
I mean, it does look amazing. Like I might actually buy a Greek statue as well to put on it.
It suits. She wasn't always there, but I did recently get a bottle opener that's just Hestia because I had to.
Oh wow, that's cool.
So really go all out on the nerd front on my part.
No, that's amazing. So we talked about the different kind of cocktails. Which would you say do you recommend the most? Which are your complete like personal favorites, or are there any characters or myths that you wanted to include but couldn't in the 75, for example? Or
I think I forgot in the moment because the other thing was that like I had like a week to come up with the 75 names, and so it's so often like you're thinking about these things, and when you're trying to think that hard, you're going to forget the ones that then feel obvious to you, and then it's too late. Like the fact that I don't think I did anything for Cadmus, who's like literally my favorite hero. And I look back and what the hell were you thinking? Like, what was I thinking? So yeah, there's definitely some that I wish that I had included, but they just all turned out super fun. As for favorite like cocktails, oh my gosh, there's so many that I really enjoy. There's so many that I still want to make. The Apollo Spritz is one of my favorites because it's kind of like, obviously it's supposed to be a play on an Aperol Spritz, but it's got Campari instead, which I think is just so much tastier than Aperol. So it's like a better Aperol Spritz, and it's named for Apollo. So that one's like a nice, easy one that I really enjoyed. Sorry, now I'm looking through to try to remember all of them. The Belliniche is so good because it's supposed to be a Bellini, but it's much more of like a real Bellini, not like a North American Bellini, which is like a sugar bomb slush of peach goo. Like it's North American Bellinis are hilarious. So this one's like it's much more of a real Bellini, but more intricate. Like there's even olive oil in there with like the peach liqueur and gin and like, oh my God, it's so good. Same with the Rosy Fingered Dawn, which was another fun name to give a cocktail, but also so tasty. Now I just want to make them, even though it's like 10:45 in the morning. The Beautiful Ugly is really interesting. Like it's strong and like hardcore. That one's named for not Pandora, but actually Medusa. And I go into some details on that. And then also teach nerds who are making cocktails about Calon Cacon. And like, it was real fun to be able to go that hard into silly, like, here's some things about ancient Greek and the translations and the way that men translate things that maybe they shouldn't. And like, God, it was dorky. But yeah, Sappho's Lesbian Libation. That is another really tasty one that's pretty easy to make. Now I want to make all of them. There's a lot that I haven't made yet that I really want to as well, but there's still so many ingredients that I haven't had a chance to buy yet. It's really fun. I really like the bloody ones too, because they're just like Achilles' smashed heel one. It's just good. It's like bourbon and raspberry and very little else, but it's a bloody heel of Achilles and you just get to, make a good joke out of it. One of the other ones that was inspired by something I made with friends years ago when I was younger and could handle more booze. But it's the Trojan horse. The play on that was that it's like deceptively full of alcohol. And so that's a fun one of like, I don't think I've had a chance to make this version of it yet, but years ago, friends of mine and I made like a fall sangria that was like only booze. We didn't really realize until we were already drinking a ton of it. Ruined us. I was like, okay, that one suits like the name of the Trojan horse. So that's all to say, like, I clearly have a lot of favorites. Depends entirely how I'm feeling or which character I want to love on at any given moment. Again, my favorite overall, not necessarily for drinking, though it is good, but is Agamemnon's bathwater, because it's just it's a real thrill to me that one got to exist.
Oh, that's great. And actually the Achilles smash heel one introduced me to bourbon, which I now love. So that's I mean,
I
that
used to
was
hate
great.
bourbon too. Or not even like I didn't, it's not that I hadn't been introduced, but I used to think I hated it because I didn't like whiskey. So I was like, no, I don't like bourbon. And then I tried Achilles the smashed heel, and then there's bourbon also in Plato's Theory of Atlantis. Plato's Theory of Atlantis, that was a fun one because I think all I told Thea was like, I was like, so make it the most ridiculous and over the top and like intricate and weird cocktail ever, because the whole idea is that like it is all just a nonsense theory, philosophical theory, like it's not anything. And so the play was like, also make the cocktail like utterly absurd, and it is so weird. Like, one, it has this this coconut stuff that you can only really get in the States. I think it's from Puerto Rico, and I tried to find it in Canada, like could not. So I made my own kind of version of it, which I think did fake it fairly well. But then it's like bourbon and and blue curacao and Midori. So you've got like the blue and the green mixing in there. Also cocktail glitter and this like coconut weird stuff. Like, it was so hardcore. But it did also, I mean, that one, I think that one's, it's good and weird. But yeah, definitely the Achilles smash heel made me be like, oh, I like bourbon. This is really good.
Yeah, I mean, I was the same. I had drunk whiskey before and wasn't that much a fan of it. Now I tried bourbon for this cocktail, and now the bottle is just at the middle center of the bar that I bought because of the book. So it's.
I recently just restocked my bourbon for that same reason. I'm like, no,
okay.
I need more.
No, I mean that's great. You also mentioned a Cadmus one. How would you conceptualize a Cadmus one? Like you throw 7 ice cubes in there, or like how would you?
Yeah. What I mean, yeah, maybe make them fight it out. No, I don't know. Like I think I just got so caught up. Maybe some like interesting flavors, because he's such a unique character coming from the East and founding this Greek dynasty. And yeah, I mean, I just am obsessed with him and Harmonia because they're so unique in Greek mythology. So I think I'm almost too into them. So then I forgot entirely to give them just a silly old cocktail. They're too good for it, I think.
And so you mentioned that like this has sort of you've gained more knowledge about cocktails and alcohol because of the book. Like, I mean, when you go out for a drink now, do you look differently to menus or like the drink that you get? Like, how has writing this book sort of changed your own perspective on what you drink?
Oh, I mean, it's like made me a cocktail connoisseur in a way that I was not before, for sure. Like, I've always been a fan of cocktails and everything, but I don't think I thought too much of it. But now I'm like, oh yeah, I know, the different liquors that I like. I know the combinations. I'm going to see something on a menu and be like, oh yeah, like that's definitely going to be good. Or, think of how it connects to my cocktails. I also always want to go and try to see if somebody will make me one for my book, because sometimes I just don't have the ingredients. Or like, I was visiting Toronto, and one of my good friends is a bartender at like a pretty fancy bar over there. And so I gave him my book and I was like, okay, there are some that I can't make at home and I need you to make me one. And even he, because of how intricate some of the alcohol is in this book, even he was like, I can't even make all of these. But what he did make me was Penelope, The Triumph of Penelope. And that one was so good. And there were so many different things in it that I couldn't have made it on my own, or at least with the ingredients that I have right now. But it turns out it was so good, and he agreed and everything. So that was like a fun one of me being like, okay, you have skills and a bigger bar at your disposal. Like, let's figure out how we can make some of these cocktails. So it's just, it's made me much more interested in cocktails and cocktail making. But also it's just generally fun to have that kind of knowledge, and then, take it to your own, cocktail experiences.
Yeah, I mean, you're officially a published cocktail author now, so you are. I mean, you have that title now. So, what have some of the reactions to the book been like? Like, are people sending you like pictures of the cocktails they make, or like, are you noticing like people introducing their friends to them, or like gaining more knowledge about these things as well, like I did. I didn't know half of these things before I got the book. But I mean, what have some of the reactions been like?
Yeah, definitely. People have sent me a lot of pictures of the ones they've made, or like that happened a lot at the beginning too, but I still get them now and then. And yeah, people are really into the nerdier aspect and the cocktail making itself. But one of the things that happened recently too, which was fun, is like somebody, I don't know if they just bought the book or they just made this cocktail for this purpose. They were really excited to make the Artemisian moonshine. So Artemis's cocktail, which is a play on the moon too. The moonshine is great. But they made it specifically to enjoy while they watched the launch of like the Artemis shuttle by NASA, which I don't know the details of. A friend tried to explain to me what exactly was going on because he's obsessed with space and I don't know. But it was fun to be like, oh, great, this thing's called Artemis and somebody made my Artemis cocktail specifically to like then also, you know, pay attention to space stuff happening, because there's so many connections with Greek myth, right? Which I think is what makes it so much fun, is like the ways in which the names and the concepts are used now. And then so to also be able to like insert cocktails is just like a silly extra thrill for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great if you can actively like change how people watch things. I mean, that's great. So do you have any follow-ups planned, like a Nectar of the Gods 2, or like a mythological cookbook that goes with it, or like snacks? I am not a cook.
Someone recently asked me if I ever think about like cooking things from the ancient world or from mythology, and I was like, I do not cook. But no, my next plan, because these two books were, like I said, they were commissioned by the publisher, and so they were definitely on. You know, they were incredibly fun, and I love them to death, and the greatest books. But they were very much like in the vein of what the publisher wanted. Less so with the Nectar, because I was able to really take it to like a nerdy level that the publisher would have never possibly imagined. I swear, like half the stuff went over their head, and they were like, "We trust her; it makes sense, I think. So let's go with it." But no, from here, I really want a book that's much more mine and much more like in the vein of my voice and my podcast and my whole kind of brand, for lack of a better word. So I am working on a book of Greek mythology that's going to be, you know, more based in the stories of the women, surprise, but also just like really comprehensive in a way that my first book is a perfect introduction, and it is been so successful. I could have never possibly imagined how many people have my book in their homes. It's wild. It's even been translated into Korean, which is like,
wow.
I don't know why just Korean, but Korean. So super cool. Yeah. So, but it's very much an introduction. It's perfect for people that are just like new to myth, or just want like a beautifully illustrated companion to the myths. But I really want to write one that's like ridiculously in depth, and like in the way that my podcast is like over the top in depth, and lots of different things. So I'm very much working on something that's much more in like my voice and my kind of whole, what I love most about Greek myth, I guess.
No, I think that will be amazing to read. And you know, who knows, in other languages, Korean as well.
Yeah, I mean, and hey, I would love to have them translated. It's cool though. I have like the Korean copy sitting, and it's just like, it's so weird. It's all the same, but like it's all Korean. Doesn't even have my name.
I mean, that's it. I mean, for a second language, I never thought Korean would be the one.
No, neither. Yeah. It was unexpected. I'll take it.
Did you actually like post on Twitter a couple months ago that you found it in Greece as well?
Yeah. I mean, it's available all over the world in a really wild way. But I went to this bookstore in Santorini, like, and not even like a main city in Santorini, like this beach town. And they had like 8 copies of it. And I was like, holy shit, like there are so many copies of it here. And I know that it also was at this this really famous and big bookstore in Athens called Politeia. But I was there. Oh yeah, it was sold out by the time I got there. But like somebody told me that it was there once, and then I was like wanted to go witness it in reality, and it was sold out. But I was like, well, I guess that's the thrill. Or you know, in the States, it's always on these Barnes and Noble tables of myths. And I thought that those, like, I was getting sent pictures of those like a year ago, and it's still on those tables. And I finally went back to the States for the first time since the pandemic, and saw it in the real world on one of these tables, and like with all the lore Olympus and with Madeline Miller and all. And I was, holy crap. Yeah, so it's been like a really big thrill how widespread that book is available, and just like really all over the world in a totally bizarre and cool way.
No, I think, these are great books, and I could recommend them to anyone who wants to find like an entertaining introduction to mythology, or to drinking with mythology. These are, I would imagine like these are a very popular and accessible entries into these things that are otherwise, a bit complicated, but you're able to deconstruct it into very straightforward and very understandable ways. I think that is something that these books really show. So I see we have been going for almost an hour now, and you basically answered all of my questions. So if there's anybody in the chat who has any other questions or things they want to say, please do so now. Otherwise, Liv, where can people find you? Where can they find the book? Apparently all over the world, so nobody nobody has an excuse not to buy it now, especially for anybody watching from Korea. But like, do you have any links to plug, or sites that you want to mention or advertise?
So the book in English is available all over. It's fully available worldwide. I think it's in a lot of shops, and if it's not in a shop, you can just order it from any bookstore across the world. I'm pretty sure that Nectar of the Gods is the same way. And then if you want another language, it is available in Korean in Korea. But otherwise the English is all over. You can listen to my podcast. About the books though, I meant to say, if you want a signed copy, I do exclusive. Well, I sign copies all around where I live, but I do exclusively shipping signed copies through Monroe's Books here in Victoria. They're a lovely, independent, and beautiful bookstore, and so any copy that you buy from them should be signed, and you can get it personalized too. They ship all over the world, but shipping can obviously be pricey. So sometimes it's considerably cheaper to buy it in your home territory. And then my podcast is Let's Talk About Myths, Baby. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. I have a jillion episodes for people to listen to. And my social media is Myths Baby everywhere. And my website is mythsbaby.com, and it has everything also.
All right. So if there's no more questions, and I see the link has been posted in the chat as well to Monroe Books, then thank you so much for, this was great. Like it's so much fun talking about mythology and cocktails as well. And I might actually make one now because it's getting late here. So thank you so much. I wish you a lot of success with the forthcoming books that you're writing. If you're ever writing an Ambrosia of the Gods one, I think that could also be amazing. And otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This is very fun. I'm happy to talk to you guys always.
All right, so I'm gonna have to